Harry Styles and Adore You on MKFM. Good evening, it's Leah with you for another MK Mental Health Hour. Tonight we're going to be talking all about perinatal depression. Joining me in the studio is John from Ellis Mental Health Support. Hello, John.
Hello, good evening.
Hello, lovely to have you with us as always. Now, if people haven't heard the Mental Health Hour before, this is a bit of a safe space for us to talk about a variety of mental health topics. All of them are available as a podcast over on our website, mkfm.com, if you have missed them. And if people don't know about the work that Ellis do, John, tell us a little bit about you.
Yeah, absolutely. So we are building a service that supports children on a one-to-one basis. We're doing that through a variety of things like training companies, getting sponsorship. So we're running a project with young carers as an example. So our aim for this year is to get corporates to sponsor a program where we can train 216 children in how to recover from things like anxiety, low mood, that sort of thing.
Fantastic. And you're always so busy. I ask you every week, have you got any updates? There's always something. What have you been up to?
Yeah, we've just run a report actually on how people have been doing in our one-to-ones. So working with a mentor, and on average, everyone that's been through our one-to-one sessions or has one-to-one sessions with us improves their well-being by 46.1%.
Oh, brilliant.
So that's like an additional feeling of 50% better than you are already.
Amazing.
Kind of thing. So it's been a really good week for that side of things.
Absolutely.
It's been amazing.
Well, well done to you and the team. Obviously doing something right, doing some amazing things in Milton.
Wonderful.
Well done you. Well done. So tonight we're talking all about perinatal depression.
Yes.
So joining us in the studio, we have got Roz. And Roz is a director of the Breastfeeding Hub. Hello, Roz.
Hi.
Welcome to the show. So obviously you've got a wealth of experience in this area. Tell us a little bit about your kind of journey to being where you are now.
Okay. I won't go completely back, but just to say that I did actually start studying fashion in the late 80s. But anyway, and then a long time went by.
You can tell you look fabulous.
Thank you, darling. And then, so I have 4 children. When I had my 4th child, I lost my job. Working for quite a large corporate, and I retrained to be a midwife while I was on, well, not on maternity leave, while I was unemployed. Retrained to be a midwife, and I quite soon went into community midwifery, working with vulnerable mums. So I dealt with, as all midwives do, we deal with perinatal mental health, but we also care for and look for risk factors sort of through the antenatal to postnatal period. And then I specialised as a lactation consultant, so supporting mums to feed their babies. So generally promoting breastfeeding, but just supporting them through whatever. And there's quite a correlation between mental ill health and the two subjects.
Absolutely.
And left the NHS in 2018 and started my own business.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much for joining us on the show. Obviously got a wealth of experience. We're also joined in the studio by Farah. Hello, Farah.
Hi, how are you?
Very well, thank you. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. So tell us a little bit about what it is that you do.
Okay, so my name is Farah and I run a postnatal recovery program because of my own story. 9 years ago, I suffered from severe postnatal depression, and that just led me to the various things I went through, going to the doctors, getting very little help in terms of how I could recover from it, led me to actually open my own business, and now I help women all around the world to recover from this particular thing because this is a passion of mine, very close to my own story.
Brilliant. Well, you're all an absolute inspiration, and obviously we've got a wealth of experience here in the studio to be talking about perinatal depression. That is the topic we're going to be discussing this evening, and we're going to be speaking about the various degrees of perinatal depression after Jess Glynn and Jax Jones. This is One Touch on MKFM. Sounding good for your Sunday evening. Jess Glynn and Jax Jones, One Touch on MKFM. This MK Mental Health Hour, we're talking with John from Ellis Mental Health Support, Roz, who is a midwife, lactation consultant and director of Breastfeeding Hub, and Farah as well, who runs postnatal recovery programs here in Milton Keynes. So we're talking about perinatal depression, and I suppose it's probably quite important, John, to identify what can actually happen and the varying degrees of perinatal depression.
Yeah, and it's really important to remember that it's not necessarily just women that experience it.
Yeah.
Men can experience it as well, which we'll cover on later on in the show. But like all things related to mental health, it usually stems from something, whether it is genetics, whether it's learned behaviour, whether it is something that's traumatic that's gone on within your life. And birth is one of the most traumatic things that a couple or an individual can go through.
Beautiful, but traumatic.
Yes.
Yeah. So really looking at where it stems from can be the first point of call to, I guess, be vigilant of anything like this maybe happening to you in the future.
Right. So what can happen then? What does it look like, perinatal depression?
Okay.
Ros?
So it can manifest in various ways, and as John said, one of the main things as a midwife, they will look and talk to the mums right from the booking appointment. So it could be somebody already suffers from this. There could be already a risk factor to them. That's one of the things they go through. But actually, it can have various manifests. It can be just feeling a bit low, it can have anxiety, you can be depressed, and it can go right up to psychosis. The way they describe it's, and I can never pronounce it, but it's puerperal psychosis. As midwives we call it purple psychosis because it's easier. But what that is that the only difference of normal psychosis is it's around the time of a new birth. And so that's the only difference.
Right.
But also around post-traumatic disorder and trauma. And we talk about trauma. Trauma is not just a physical thing as we know it is mental, but trauma is not what you may not think something's traumatic to one person is to another. So I, as a midwife, if there's loads of blood and we were really, it was touch and go and things were going really badly, and we think that's traumatic, but the mother doesn't because she's got her baby at the end of it.
Yeah.
Or we could watch a really normal delivery, but we don't know what's happened in that parent's life and her partner, and they could be traumatized.
I think there's a bit of a preconception around trauma as well, because you think that it's what happens to the individual. Like you've got to be in something physical, like an accident or a car crash or something like that. But actually, people witnessing stuff like that as well. Because we did some sessions with Transport for London a while back, and people obviously control the CCTV cameras and stuff. They're really impacted by things that might go on, like a terrorist situation or something like that. So it's not necessarily just the people who are involved, it's others on the periphery that might witness things too, that it has an impact on them, which you might not think straight away.
So if there's varying degrees then, Ros, how do you kind of identify whether someone does have perinatal depression?
Okay, in terms of, I'm going to take you back if that's okay, and go to the antenatal bit, because really what they're trying to do in maternity is to sort of highlight risk factors, because so that's the bit at which health professionals need to be aware, but also people themselves or the family around the mother. And one of the first things that a midwife will ask in the booking, so the booking appointment is the very first appointment a mum will go to. They're called the Hooley questions, and I'm just going to read two of them if that's okay.
Yes, please.
So during the past month, have you often been bothered by feeling down, depressed or hopeless? And then the other question, during the past month, have you often been bothered by having little interest or pleasure in doing things? Quite simple questions, but it makes us think that's actually not normal, but they may be normalising it. And their answer to that will then take the midwife on to see if there's anything else that they can do. There's a couple of questions. It's called the GAD7 PHQ9, and there are a list of questions that will go through determining anxiety or depression. So that's sort of the factors. And then every time a midwife sees or a health professional sees a mum, they should really be asking it, but they will flag up if that mum's had a history.
Right.
But it's not just the mum's history. So we will ask about family history, because that, again, is very key. There's a lot of studies that have shown that a baby born to a depressed or a mother who's going through high anxiety or post-traumatic stress, they will actually have high anxiety as well.
Right.
So they have high stress levels, high cortisol levels as they're born, and so they're at a greater risk. Does that make sense?
Of course, yeah.
So, but how it can be recognised, again, we ask those questions postnatally. So right from birth. So if they're on the ward or if the community midwife's visiting them at home, they will be asked those questions. They will be checking on how that mother's feeling, and we all hear about baby blues, day 3. And things get minimised quite naturally, whereas actually baby blues are something. It's a chemical change in the body, but actually midwives go a little bit further to determine if there's something else going on.
And I suppose it's quite difficult, actually, because it's meant to be such a beautiful and amazing thing, and having those baby blues, like you say, people kind of dumb it down a little bit.
Exactly.
But they do exist, and really, really important that we're discussing it this evening. We're going to be speaking to Farah, who has experienced postnatal depression and has first-hand experience after Liam Payne and Jay Balvin. Familiar is on the way for you next.
The MK Mental Health Hour with 123 Internet Group.
MKFM.
Liam Payne, Jay Balvin, Familiar on MKFM. Good evening, it's Leah with you for another MK Mental Health Hour. Tonight we're talking about perinatal depression. We've kind of found out and heard from Roz, a midwife and director of the Breastfeeding Hub, about what can happen and the varying degrees of perinatal depression. And now we're joined in the studio by Farah, who's actually experienced perinatal depression. Good evening, Farah. Thank you for joining us. So where did it all begin for you?
Okay, so I, about 9 years ago, when I gave birth to my second son, that's when I actually experienced. So I had a son already who was 4, and with my second birth, it was quite traumatic. Well, the first birth, actually, the pregnancy was good, but the birth itself was traumatic for me and my ex-husband, my whole family. Anyway, I put that onto the side because I'm thinking, that's how it's a first birth, just get over it, it's fine. But 4 years later, when I was pregnant with my second son, I promised myself I'm going to have a cesarean and not a natural birth, because I was freaked out from the natural birth. So I knew in my head this is going to be hard, because I remember only 4 years ago this was the case. However, within 6 months of being pregnant, I had developed a really I am going to say this on the radio, piles, and they were really, really traumatic for me. I was bleeding so much, and for 3 months, between 6 and 9 months, I literally was going through a very difficult time. And then when I gave birth, which was a cesarean, I start suffering from what I thought were blues. So I didn't know what postnatal depression was at all. And I went to the doctors because my ex-husband at this stage was really worried, because I wasn't coping with a 4-year-old and a baby and looking after the house. When I said this to my family close by, they were saying things like, you know, you're so lucky, you've got 2 boys, you know, you've got a lovely, beautiful house, what's the problem? And I literally thought, what is the problem? Why am I feeling like I want to cry all the time? I don't want to get dressed, I don't want to go out, I don't want to talk to anyone. And I was very exhausted. And I believe now, looking back, is because the birth was so traumatic, and the things that I went through. I had an operation at 6 months old. I was 6 months pregnant, and my baby was in the tummy, and there was a touch and go whether he will live or I will live.
Gosh.
All these things came out after, like my ex-husband didn't even tell me up to this day, literally told me last week, because I was telling him I'm coming here to talk about this. So that, as a result of that, I then he took me to doctors. I didn't want to go, because I'm like, what am I going to say to him? What am I going to say? There's nothing physically wrong.
How far is this after
3 months.
birth? So it's 3 months after
I
you've
started
given
to
birth.
feel it before, but I wasn't going to go, because I thought it's going to go. Like I'm going to wake up the next morning and it's going to go.
So
I
it took
literally
3
believed
months
in that.
basically to get to the doctors.
Courage. Yeah, that's right. Because I didn't really know what I'm going to say. I literally didn't know how to explain it. And then my ex-husband said, just say exactly how you're feeling. So he came with me and he did most of the talking. And then very quickly, within 5 minutes of the appointment, and the appointment was 10 minutes, I had to fill out a questionnaire, about 27 questions, and I scored quite high on this questionnaire, which Roz would probably...
Roz is nodding along.
That would be the
Nodding,
PHQ-9
that's
that
right.
would have been...
And I scored quite high on that. So it was 24 out of 27. I have no idea what this question is about at this stage. Very quickly was I given antidepressants, citalopram, I remember them very clearly. And the minute I was given those, I was not happy, because my dad's been on them for years, and I haven't seen anything majorly positive. I see him in an okay state, but nothing that like a recovered man.
Right.
So I didn't want to take them. So my first thing was, no, I'm not taking them. I'll take the prescription, but I won't take them, because I think I can do this. I've been running a massive department store previous to having a baby, very confident, and there's no way I could let this thing defeat me. I totally believe this will go away. It will go away tomorrow. But it didn't, and it stayed. So as a pressure from family and to look after 2 boys, I had to take these tablets.
So then where did it go from there, Farah?
So what the tablets actually did, what they made me a little bit calmer, so I stopped crying as much. But they didn't actually solve the issue. And this is what my problem was with, what I was looking for was some kind of guidance. So I was looking for some kind of practical tips to get me out of this situation. I needed to do things. I needed to look after my health. I was eating very poorly. I mean, this will shock you really, because I was eating sugar laces. Because I thought it would give me energy just to look after my kids. The boys were not sleeping at night. They picked up on all the anxiety. I can see that looking back now. And both of them suffer from anxiety now. And one of my younger son actually is having some mentoring session actually with Arthur Ellis as a result of what actually happened to me. So it's so important that I recognize this, and people. The reason I'm actually telling my story is I would like women that are actually thinking about having a baby or are going through this is to seek help quickly, because it really does affect not just you as a mum, but the effects on the whole family.
Absolutely. And you're so brave to share your story. Thank you so much for speaking about that. And you're so right. It does have a big impact on the whole family and men as well. We're going to be talking about the impact that perinatal depression can have on men after Daniel Bedingfield. Now, this has got to get through this on MKFM. Daniel Bedingfield, got to get through this on MKFM. Tonight, we're talking all about perinatal depression on the MK Mental Health Hour. We've just heard from Farah, who has first-hand experience of postnatal depression. And thank you so much, Farah, for sharing your story. Kind of touched on the fact that it did really impact your entire family, and it's really important to remember that it impacts on men. It is so important that we remember that, isn't it, John?
Yeah, and there is this thing where as soon as you hear postnatal or perinatal depression, that you immediately think of the female, which is understandable because obviously they go through quite a traumatic experience. But men are just affected as women. I think, Ros, you said around...
So what the statistic is, there's a study particularly on post-traumatic stress disorder that the figures are comparable. If a woman is suffering postnatal PTSD, the partner will, the male will as well. I think that's quite a strong statistic.
Yeah,
it's 50-50.
I think that the empowerment of women, I have this theory.
Go on, John.
And I've got a great audience right now for this. But I believe that the empowerment of women, as women become more empowered, then we will see the statistics of male suicide and all of that coming down. If you think years and years ago when women were kind of suppressed in what they were able to do and all of that sort of stuff, then it puts that pressure on the guy.
Yeah.
Yes, it empowers them and they can do everything, but that's an awful lot of pressure. So where it's more shared, I think that those numbers will level out because men are, the women are able to be talked to more.
Absolutely.
They're more powerful to be able to help. And
I won't get too geeky, but when the woman's pregnant, if she's in, like I said, we're talking about cortisol and stress levels, if she is in a better frame of mind and she's able to talk, her baby will be in that better frame of mind.
Yeah.
So you're already affecting their health.
Yeah.
And Farah, you did mention about during your birth and the kind of trauma around it, that it did really affect your ex-husband as well.
Yeah, this is one of those things. Now we are divorced for past 5 years, and if there was one thing that I kind of regret, but I also forgive myself for it. When I was in the whole postnatal depression mode, looking after 2 under 5-year-olds, I did not have time to really understand what my husband was going through. I did not ask him how he was. I was very, very selfish. And if he actually opened his mouth to say a tiny little thing like, this affecting me as well, I would literally shout down his throat and say, what do you mean? I've given birth. And I'll go into this whole shouting thing because I was just not coping, and I thought, don't even come near me telling me you have a problem. But now looking back, after a year or 2, I don't exactly remember the timeline, he actually went and sought help.
Right.
Because actually he suffered from postnatal depression. We did not know what postnatal depression was, like I said to you, let alone men suffering from it. And now we know that's what he was going through, but there was no space for him to speak about it to anyone. And men generally don't seem to have friends they can talk openly like we do. So I think my recovery is very much about talking. I've I will go through in a minute how I healed myself, but he did not have that network support system. So yes, definitely male postnatal depression is out there, and like Ross just said, the statistics are equal. So that's today that's a kind of shock to me as well.
And John, we were just talking in that song about the feeling of kind of helplessness and the trauma that it must be for a man to kind of watch their partner go through such traumatic situation.
Well, if you're in the birthing room with somebody, and ideally in an ideal world, maybe not in every single situation, that's the person you love most in the world, and to see somebody going through that when you care about them so much. And also we've spoken, Ros, with each other about the amount of time that men get to recover, because parental leave is typically not equal in that respect. But there are different things, and different companies are now looking more into shared parental leave and different things that they can do.
Absolutely, and I think that has a huge impact. So, generally a partner will have 2 weeks leave, and so they're going back to work probably processing all these thoughts, but they just don't have time, or they don't have the capability. But also, companies are looking into this a lot better in terms of shared parental leave. But I think shared parental leave tends to happen a few months down the line, so it does impact them. And I just want to say, this isn't just about dads, so the partner could be a female as well, it could be a woman. And so it's just thinking about that other person who isn't the birth parent, how separate from it they can feel.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think that if you Farah, you said about being selfish, which I don't agree with. I don't think you were being selfish, because if you look at the things that the Hooley questions were asking, which I don't think are asked to the partner in the first initial appointment, but if you look at low mood or the things that they're kind of asking to identify, that has an impact on emotional literacy, and that is things like empathy, how motivated you are, how self-aware you are, or how you regulate your emotions. So you might lash out and get angry. So you can sort of recognise these different things. So if those depression, hopelessness, anxiety are affected, it has a knock-on effect. So in that state of mind, you naturally don't have the ability sometimes to see it from someone else's point of view. So it's not selfish, it's just the state of mind that you're in.
And I imagine a lot of people can probably relate to what you've said this evening.
Probably. And I think that's why I wanted to really be open and say exactly how I was. And because I have talked through this now, I feel comfortable talking. But I think a lot of people don't say it. When my midwife appointments used to come through, wasn't honest. I was too worried about they're going to judge me as a mother that I'm not coping. So I was like, yeah, everything's fine. Just do this, what you need to do, and go, because you're going to judge me that I'm not coping. If I was to actually open up, maybe I would have got help, maybe in a different way, or sooner as well.
But you did come through it, and you did get out of it.
Yes, I did. Absolutely,
exactly.
yes.
And we're going to talk about kind of that recovery process next.
The MK Mental Health Hour with 123 Internet Group.
MKFM.
We're loving that here in the studio. Calvin Harris and Florence with Sweet Nothing on MKFM. It's Leah with you for another MK Mental Health Hour. Tonight we're talking all about perinatal depression, joined in the studio by John from Arthur Ellis, Ros, who is a midwife and lactation consultant and director of Breastfeeding Hub, and Farah, who has experienced postnatal depression and now runs a business as a result of that. And to get on that journey, Farah, I mean, you've shared so eloquently this evening about how you struggle with postnatal depression, and you've kind of shone a bit of a light on your husband as well, who was also impacted, in your entire family. Where did it kind of change? What was the kind of changing point for you?
Okay, so here I was in the midst of looking after my household, a little control because I started taking some antidepressants. However, still not feeling great, not ready to go back to work. Just everything felt horrendous. I had a next door neighbor move in, and she is very, I'm going to mention her name. No, I'm not going to mention her name, sorry. She's very forthcoming, and she came and knocked on the door her first day and gave us some sweets and said, when we move new homes, this is what we do. So I wouldn't even open the door. I kind of literally tiny bit opened the door and took these sweets quickly and shut the door because I wasn't in place to meet people. Anyway, she continued to come over, and then one day she said, yeah, we're going for a walk, and I said no, I don't go outside. I just literally don't. Even my husband had to come from work to pick my little son from school because I wouldn't go outside the house. That was my biggest issue. So anyway, she stood her ground until I actually came out of the house, and this was months later. She kept doing that, and we'll talk just from outside the door. Then we went around the lake once, and that first time I felt something. I felt so good, and I believe now that's the serotonin level. I felt so good that I never stopped that walk for about good 3-4 years. Those walks then turned into jogs, and those jogs turned into runs. I did my first 5K, and I was absolutely starting to live life and enjoy myself. And then I ended up running 3 half marathons as a result of that. And that was part of my healing process. And that's how I kind of came out of that.
Wow.
And you didn't need antidepressants after?
I didn't. I actually dropped my antidepressant halfway. I mean, I stopped taking them. Like, when you just, I'll take it. But I felt like I didn't need it. Why do I need this? Because I'm actually getting real stuff from actually running.
It can certainly replace it. I think there's studies that if you get enough
100%.
exercise, it's the same hormone release
Same
that
thing.
they do. Obviously guided by a doctor.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's amazing.
So running for you was a huge
Absolutely,
saviour, and
yes.
your neighbour as well. Big
And
shout
my
out
neighbour,
to
yeah,
her.
absolutely,
What an
yes.
amazing story, brilliant. There are some tips that you have as well, Ros, isn't there, postnatally that you'd like to share?
Yeah, and one of them is actually a bit of a controversial one, and it sort of shouldn't be. Obviously, I'm a lactation consultant, but with a lot of health professionals that support mothers who have postnatal mental ill health, they see breastfeeding as getting in the way because obviously mums are sleep deprived, believe me, however they feed their baby. But actually it's really important that not only just for the mental ill health, but for feeding, that mother surrounds herself by a village. She surrounds herself by support, and that includes feeding her baby. The physical process of feeding her baby and her baby taking on and suckling at the breast give both of them endorphins, serotonin levels raise, and they are calm. And so it reduces stress, it reduces cortisol. So actually, studies are clear cut that it reduces a mother's risk of postnatal depression, and it reduces teenage depression. So there's been a huge study, it reduces the risk of teenage suicide. So exactly what John said, there's already studies out there, John, that actually prove what you said earlier.
Good.
The other couple of things really, well, we've sort of said about getting a village around you. You may not have a partner, you may be a single mum, or your partner may be having to go straight back to work. So make sure you know who those people are. And you may feel people aren't taking you seriously, you can't talk to your health professional, whoever it is, talk to them. Just like Farah did. Her neighbour's amazing. She kept on with tenacity, but just recognise it yourself and talk.
Brilliant. Well, some really, really great, helpful tips and advice this evening. We'll tell you how you can get your hands on a very helpful expert guide all about perinatal depression right after this. Loud Luxury and Body on MKFM. So the Mental Health Hour tonight, we've been speaking all about perinatal depression. Some great tips and advice as always, John. A quick roundup now if people have missed part of the show.
Yes, there's a variety of things that you can do or get in place. So before pregnancy, you can really get to know your family history, what you might be susceptible to, and look at yourself as well, that you might have tendencies to become obsessed with things like fitness or other mechanisms that you put in place for yourself. It can be unhealthy that they get too much, so just be able to monitor that. Use your army. So as Ros describes, as a bit of a village around you of people that know what those are, so all those obsessive behaviours that you might be accustomed to, get them to monitor them for you, because as we sort of said about the different states of mind that you can be in, you might not recognise it yourself. Talk to your partner and be honest with each other. So whether it's male, female, anybody, you need to be talking and being honest about how you're feeling. And if it's helpful, you can also monitor your mood. So keep a bit of a mood diary throughout the whole process, and have a fitness plan and nutrition plan in place. And by knowing the stages of pregnancy, as your body develops and as that becomes more and more difficult, you can have planned changes and planned adjustments as you go.
Brilliant. I know all of those tips are available as a guide over on your website. If people want to find that, how can they do it?
Yeah, Support Guides now on our homepage, so that is arthurellismhs.com.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, John. And Ros, it's been a pleasure to have you in on the show as well. Midwife, lactation consultant, director of Breastfeeding Hub.
You're welcome.
You are just a guru in all of this area. If people want to find out more details about what it is that you do, how can they do that?
Okay, so you go on to all the W's, breastfeedinghub.org. And actually, before I go, I just want to say one quick thing. The medication of choice for a breastfeeding mum, if she has postnatal depression or anxiety, is sertraline. But if you're not sure about your medication you're being asked to go onto the breastfeedingnetwork.com. they will let you know what's a good, a sort of a safe medicine, but most medicines are safe in breastfeeding.
Brilliant, top tip. Thank you very much, Roz. And Farah, if people want to find out more about you, your journey, and the program that you're currently running to help people with postnatal depression, how can they do that?
Okay, if any of the mums if you've related or resonated with my story, please don't suffer after listening to this. Please ask for help, because I promise you need to apply some practical tips in your life and you will come out of this like I have. If you want to get in touch, you can find me under farahkaramburi.com, and I am on Facebook, on LinkedIn, and also on Instagram.
Brilliant. Well, thank you all so much for joining us this evening, and do join us at the same time next week, 7 o'clock, for another MK Mental Health Hour.
The MK Mental Health Hour and MKFM.